My name's Tom Walker. I joined the Pastel Society in 2012. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to talk to you about secrets of the dust, and by this I mean pastels. Pastels start out with a pigment, a powdered pigment, and the powdered pigment is mixed with what used to be mixed with gum arabic. Then it's bound together into a paste, which is where the name pastel comes from. They're either rolled or moulded into sticks, they harden. We pick up these sticks and we apply them with different kinds of pressure to a piece of paper, and what happens is that the bond is broken, the dust is smeared onto the paper, and off we go on an extraordinary adventure. I started to get really interested in pastels in relation to a project that I took on myself relating to organ music. That project introduced me to what must be one of the most versatile and flexible mediums in the art world. And in this particular project there were many pieces of organ music composed by a man whose theme was bringing light out of darkness. For many years now I have been using pastels exclusively on black paper, because I know that every mark I make on that paper is light appearing in darkness. Here's a little piece of white to start it off. Here's a pot of fragments of pastel. I've got loads of pots of fragments because they built up over the years. And the ultimate improvisational action, you might say, is to get a handful of these fragments. Here we are. And to go another handful, a bit slower. This is an exercise that I have been getting my pastel students to do for years, because if you're coming to a plain black sheet of paper and you don't have a great deal of experience of pasteling, the best possible way to loosen up and get into it is to do just that. And then you sit back and look at it for a while and see what it is offering you. It's like a portal that you're going to jump through into goodness knows what. Something is bound to develop out of it, or things will be suggested by it. But you didn't know that until you'd made the first move, as it were. The portal opens and in you go. There we are, sweeping up what went onto the floor, and already pastel is demonstrating to you a different kind of mark, a soft smearing mark, one of many kinds of mark that either happen accidentally or deliberately. Well, already as a consequence of this big bang, you might call it, in space, there are so many different kinds of textures and marks not just from the pastels themselves, but sort of secondary marks. These are the parts where my hand has smudged the pastel. You can see that there's a host of marks going on in here, none of which I had any control of. The only parts I had control of were this kind of swirl, because I've got to keep myself on this piece of paper somehow. But otherwise, everything else is random. It's not even an improvisation in a sense. It's a complete explosion, which is offering me all sorts of opportunities to develop in different ways. And I'm sure that you, looking at this too, will be seeing things in there which can be developed and worked on. But I am going to use this purely as a starting point for showing you how to use certain techniques and pressures and little movements with the fingers and with the pastels to create all sorts of little devices. If I can find a stick about right, it's this one I think. I've got a stick here which is fairly sharp edged on both ends, and I'm just going to start on a piece that's not worked on yet. I'm going to put the whole of the side of the stick on there, and I'm going to press down on the top end, and then I'm going to pull it like that. I'm going to take it off, and you can see what happens. You get a lovely bright sharp edge, and you get a broken fading edge here. And if I bring my finger in here now and just rub it, I'm not going to disturb that sharp edge, but I'm going to make the other edge disappear and fade away into the darkness. As I said, I call this cutting out, because basically you're sort of cutting with that razor sharp edge there. But it offers you all sorts of opportunities, and I've spotted one in the middle of the picture here. Now I happen to notice that right in the middle we've got what looks like the beginnings of a planet. Here's the planet here, there's the bottom edge of it. The rest of it's disappeared into the chaos, but it's definitely asking for something to happen to it. So the end that's closest to you is the one that hasn't got the pressure on it. And I'm going to try and go round my planet now, making sure that I'm pressing down on the right edge. Here we go. I can't see what I'm doing now, so I've got to go in from the other side. And this time I'm not going to put quite so much pressure on, because I want it to fade away at the top of it. See if I can join up with that bit I did there. Just about. Right, I'm going to leave those now. And I'm going to do the same as I did with the first little experiment down there, only I'm going to go round this time. And this time I'm easing off, and I'm going to fade it and fade it. And pastel will travel a very long way, a little pastel. So if this is a planet, it must be several million miles we've already gone with it. And if I carry on, I have the beginnings of something rather interesting. Here's a line that's sort of sweeping across the top of my planet. What happens if I go backwards and forwards with this? I don't want it to disappear completely. And let's try doing the same here. Slightly broader piece of... There's enough pastel in there to smear and soften. Going round and round now. Pressing and pressing, because I want this to get really soft and smooth. Just in that little space. I will confine it inside that little shape there. If I come away to some other part where I've got much brighter marks, like this here, big white mark here, I'm going to smear again. It's the simplest of marks, but it has huge potential as a device. I'm just going to demonstrate now something that will be surprising to some, at least, and that is that although, as you can see on this, you've got lots of different colours, there's sort of smears and marks and all the rest of it, but they're made with something that appears to be, or in some parts you can see it isn't, solid, or rather opaque, a lot of the marks. But pastel is actually transparent. I'm just going to demonstrate that by bringing this. I'm not pressing with any pressure on either end, I'm just using the whole of the side of the stick, which may actually come with an interesting result on its own. And I'm going to pull it across my planet. And what I've basically done is cast a little veil of colour over what's already there. And if I now take my finger and I soften it down very, very slowly and gently, what will happen is that veil will soften, and the bottom part of my planet is going to change colour, but you'll still see it, even some of the marks on it. And you'll see that I've done this within another framework which is just outside where the planet is. This arc here, very interesting arc, which is suggesting to me something like a cathedral. So perhaps we're going to be looking into an interior space with a rose window that looks like a planet. All sorts of things start to get the imagination going, and you can see that I can still see the marks underneath this little veil of colour. There we are. This is an ordinary white plastic rubber. You can buy them for £1.50 in a shop, I think. There are other makes as well which are cheaper. I'm going to take it out of its jacket. You can go into art shops and you can get little tools for making different kinds of marks with pastels and in other operations with other mediums, but they're quite expensive. This rubber is not expensive, and it's already cut to a rather nice sharp edge one end. So what happens if I now use that sharp edge to cut through this little veil? I've got a line here coming down at a tangent to my planet. I'm going to put the rubber on that line and I'm going to continue it through the veil. And what happens is that I'm basically rubbing out a line. I'm going to take the pressure off now and fade it away. I'm subtracting. I've just added this veil and now subtracting with the rubber a part of that. But I'm also simultaneously making a part of a structure which I've already said could be a cathedral. I've got another line sweeping across here. What happens if I push my rubber through all those marks? I'm going to stop, I'm going to curve it over and carry on through there. And you can see that what's happening is that I'm not rubbing out, I'm smearing. I'm going to push it again underneath the same mark. What begins to happen is a kind of liquid texture appears. I'm going to keep going now a bit faster. A bit faster. I haven't lost the marks I made, I'm simply changing them into a different kind of identity. Watery, a little bit shiny. There's certainly quite a few of the techniques. I think partly a happy accident, particularly using the rubber. I mean, it literally happened as a consequence of trying to rub something out. And suddenly there it was, this marvellous texture that was completely incidental to what I was doing. I shall use a different colour now. I'm going to break it. So in breaking it, what I'm giving myself is lots of sharp edges on the end of this. And I just use the edge. I can get a very thin line going on. And now as I go, I'm going to push the whole of the stick down flat onto the paper and keep pressing. Now I'm going to lift it again. And fade away the soft side of it. And I think, just by coincidence, it certainly wasn't planned, but I've got a curve joining up here. These are nice little gentle things. I'm going to do something a bit more radical now. Still thinking about the cathedral. I'm going to put the rubber at the apex of this arch here. Whole of the side of the rubber, and the bottom edge of it is on my line here. I'm going to try and stick to that line, and I'm going to pull the whole thing downwards like that. So that what I've done is actually I've made another kind of a veil over the top of the veil that was there before. What happens if I sit it on its edge now and I'm turning the rubber in my fingers, and suddenly we've got what could well be the surface of water. So it looks like this is going to be a submerged cathedral because we've got some water coming into it. And I'm going to go to the top of the apex here where it would join on with that bit I just rubbed. Different colour. Using the cutting out now, so I'm pressing down on the bottom edge of this blue. And I'm going to try and make an arc coming down this way. And again I'm going to soften it and rub it away into the outer area. Still managing to retain some of the things underneath as well. But suddenly I get the urge to be a bit more rebellious. Anarchy has come into the picture. It's all got a bit too purposeful. Lots of pastel down here. So if I start smoothing it, it's all going to blend and merge and smear. And certain things will happen over which I have very little control. Got a kind of idea what's going to happen, but it's a whole improvisational experiment. Our cathedral is beginning to submerge rather a lot. Now I'm really going to work hard with the rubber now. On the edge, pulling it and really giving it a terrific amount of pressure. And I'm really pushing hard on the bottom edge of the rubber here. So in effect I am rubbing out, but I'm also creating forms and shapes. And now I'm going to go around and around. Now what we've got is possibly promising storm clouds here. Because I know that the harder I press, the more darkness I will get. So it's a constant battle between the light of the pastel and the darkness underneath. It's a fascinating process. You're partly in control, but you're certainly not in full control. There are other things going on, and one's life is going on, and everything around you is going on, visually and emotionally, and so one's mind is thronging with stuff. This is an ordinary school compass. There it is. This is a white pastel pencil, and I'm going to go into the middle of my planet, and I'm going to put it where the apex of my vault is for my cathedral. And this time right, ruler with the rubber this time on its edge. And I'm doing it vertically because I want this to be a pillar. You come to that line there. What is happening now is that as I increasingly add layer upon layer, that the colours are combining, they are incidentally and accidentally creating their own forms and shapes, so that the one thing I am doing is actually making several other things happen at the same time. And the more I overlay and fiddle around on the top with the rubber or with pastels and that sort of thing, the more intense and rich the colours become, and the whole chaotic sort of order of it begins to take on all sorts of exciting possibilities. Now, I definitely think that this cathedral is in deep trouble. It's not only submerged, but there's a massive storm going on at the same time. Kind of reflection of our current situation in a way. This whole thing of making a thin line and then turning as you go is a kind of calligraphy. It's what you do with your calligraphy pen. Here's a round stick which has got a flat edge to it. I'm going to put my palm on it, or maybe I'll put it my finger ends first, and I'm going to roll it. If you ever want to do a skeleton with a spinal cord, there's one way to try it anyway. This is white, or mostly white, I'm picking up here. And I'm walking it across now, the rubber. Thought processes are going on at the moment are telling me that I'm very nearly finished. I've got one more thing I want to do. This is white, a soft white, very crumbly. Right? And you get to a point where you think that's probably the end of that picture. I'm going to stop there. But it isn't the end, it's just a part of an unending trail of pictures which are all connected. That is to say, you stop one and you start another one, but they're the same picture. They're one enormous picture, and each one is a kind of an attempt to do better than last time, basically. You never arrive. It's always open. It's completely open-ended. It doesn't end, really, which is good. That's great. If it did end, I don't know what I'd be doing. I'm probably in a box underground or something.